The sound was small, almost silly to anyone who hadn't been waiting for it. The clink of a thin coffee cup against a saucer, a brittle domestic tinkle. But to Marianne at 65, it sounded like an alarm she'd ignored for 30 years. In a single heartbeat she saw all the moments she had misread. The smiles that hid tears, the jokes that covered fear, the polite silences that were actually bargains with pain. She understood, with a slow, terrible clarity, that truth had been waiting all along on the other side of a brittle cup. That night she decided she could no longer be gentle with silence. My name is Marianne Holt. I am 65 years old. I live in a cedar-scented bungalow in Boise, Idaho, not far from the slow, patient river that cuts through the city. I taught high school history for 30 years, and I loved it with the kind of quiet stubbornness that gets you through long lessons and longer winters. My husband, David, died 9 years ago. We had 2 children, Claire, 36, who lives in Seattle, and Ben, 33, who still lives nearby. For most of my life I believed that family was where you went to be safe. I believed in forgiveness, in patience, in using a soft voice when the world was loud. I grew up thinking that kindness was a currency, and I spent my life investing it. I also learned, the hard way, that kindness can blind you. This story is about my daughter Claire. It is about the cruelty thinly disguised as concern that came from her mother-in-law, Madeline. It is about the way a woman in a position of quiet power can erode another woman's life by erasing her rights, her voice, her dignity. It is about how I, a little older and slower to anger than I used to be, found a kind of fierce courage I did not know I had. It is a story about justice that does not always come from courts. A justice crafted from truth, community, and an unshakable refusal to let silence win. Claire married young. She was 26, bright, and impatient in the best way. The kind of person who wanted to change things quickly, to make the world cleaner and kinder overnight. She married Aaron on a bright June day in Seattle, under a canopy of ginkgo trees. I loved Aaron. I welcomed him into our family with open arms. Madeline, his mother, smiled at the wedding and clapped politely. I remember thinking she had a certain polish, a woman who had learned how to present herself properly. I thought she was just controlled. What I did not see then, and what I wish I had, were the small things. The way she would make lists about Claire's cooking. The quiet impatience when Claire took maternity leave. The remarks about priorities, when Claire gave extra hours to a volunteer project. Once, during a family dinner, Madeline suggested that Claire's career had plateaued, and that perhaps Claire would be happier adjusting her ambitions to make space for the right kind of homemaking. She joked, and the joke slid sharp under Claire's polite laughter. Claire laughed, of course. She laughed because she had been taught to defuse, to be agreeable, to keep the peace. She didn't fight. That's how Madeline learned she could press. Madeline's behavior grew small and persistent like a leak. At first it was nitpicking. The way Claire folded napkins, the brand of milk she bought, the color she painted the nursery. Then it became decisions about the children. Which extracurriculars were appropriate, how they should be disciplined when they should visit. Madeline insisted on routines that suited her sensibilities and criticized anything that threatened her control. What hurt most wasn't always what she said. It was her ability to shape the family narrative. When Claire objected, Madeline would smile and say, "Oh honey, I'm only trying to help." When Aaron noticed, he told his mother he appreciated her wisdom. It's hard to explain the particular kind of loneliness that forms when the man you love chooses the mother who belittles you over the woman who shoulders the household. Madeline monetized influence. She used money in polite, devastating ways. Paid for summer camps and then reminded the kids of how much she sacrificed. Bought expensive school supplies and then criticized Claire for being budget conscious. At family gatherings, she'd slip a comment, subtle, publicly flattering toward Aaron, quietly cruel toward Claire. "Some mothers just know how to get things right," she'd murmur, while looking at Claire with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Claire began to withdraw. She stopped calling as frequently. When she did visit, she arrived tired and left apologetic. One November, after a heated but polite disagreement about where the children should spend winter break, she drove away and cried in the car for the first time in my presence. For years, she said, whispered, really, that her voice was being eroded, and she felt smaller inside her marriage than she had before. The moment that changed everything was not sudden. It was a slow unspooling. But there's one memory I carry like a photograph. Claire at my kitchen table, hands clasped around a chipped mug, and the way her knuckles went white. She told me then, for the first time, about the day Madeline forbade her from visiting the pediatrician without permission, about how she was criticized for breastfeeding for too long, and then for not breastfeeding, about how financial decisions were made without consultation, and how questions about work were met with a cold. That's not necessary for someone like you. Claire told me that once, when she wanted to enroll their youngest in music classes, Madeline found a way to call it frivolous and not the right investment. When Claire persisted, Madeline questioned Aaron in a way that made him defensive. Claire's self-worth, she said, had been chipped away by repeated messages. You are naive, you are weak, you are not capable of making sensible choices. She had internalized those messages. She had apologized to Madeline, to Aaron, to herself, until she believed the apologies were proof of guilt. I listened, with my own lifetime of maternal instincts and a new fear I couldn't name. Anger rose in me. Not a theatrical, cinematic rage, but a cold, deliberate clarity. This was not casual disagreement or normal in-law friction. This was a pattern of small cruelties designed to maintain dominance, and to reshape a woman's life in service of another's image. I told Claire we would do something together. Not a lawsuit, not an opera of accusation, but a series of careful truths. We began with documentation, dates, words, the small humiliations that become erasers of spirit. We recorded conversations when appropriate. We started to take notes after gatherings. I asked Claire to write, in her own unjudging voice, how each incident made her feel. Writing helped her build language for the pain she'd been taught to disguise. Then we tried conversation. I invited Madeline for lunch. I wanted to keep it civil. I wanted to give her the chance to correct herself before I cast her as villain. Because sometimes people can be taught to behave differently if they are shown the consequences of their actions. Madeline arrived with a polite smile, wearing a scarf that looked expensive and smelling faintly of citrus. I spoke first, careful and measured. I told her that Claire had been hurting. I showed her the notes, explained the examples. I did not yell. I offered her the dignity of hearing the truth. She leaned back and gave me that same polite smile. I don't know what you mean, she said. Claire is being oversensitive. I only want what's best for my grandchildren. When I mentioned the money used to control decisions, her smile hardened. She suggested perhaps Claire was misremembering. When I mentioned the way she spoke to Claire in front of the children, she countered with anecdotes about standards and good manners. The conversation closed like a door. I felt foolish for expecting her to see herself. That night, Claire wept in my kitchen. She said, I thought you would say something. I said, I did say something. Then I realized that saying was not enough. If Madeline would not accept her actions, other routes must be taken. And so, with a careful steadiness I had not felt in years, I began to build a chorus of witnesses. You would be amazed what a community can do when a single voice stops being quiet. We found allies in small, unexpected places. The school secretary who'd noticed the way caregivers talked down to Claire at conferences, the PTA president who had once had an awkward encounter with Madeline, Aaron's sister, who texted quietly that she had seen similar behavior but feared starting family fights. We found a therapist who helped Claire articulate boundaries. We found a family lawyer who spoke, professionally, not sensationally, about what rights Claire had around finances and custody decisions. None of these allies were interested in spectacle. They simply did not want to see another woman diminished. What we did not do was rally like a mob. We met privately, gathered facts, and created clear, enforceable boundaries. Claire and Aaron attended counseling. Aaron was defensive at first. How could he not be when it involved his mother? He insisted his mother meant well. But when presented with evidence, with the documentation Claire had kept, the witnesses who corroborated the pattern, his defensiveness began to shift. Denial is a protective force. Evidence is patient. The crucial moment came not with shouting but with clarity. We told Aaron that Claire felt controlled, and that if his mother wanted to continue to be part of their family, she would have to accept boundaries. Simple things. not making decisions about their children's education unilaterally, not retracting support as a means of control, and most importantly, not belittling Claire in front of anyone. Madeline did not accept the boundaries easily. She retreated into a posture of wounded dignity and, at first, began to escalate. She sent Claire condescending emails disguised as concern. She interrupted family events with helpful lectures. But when the larger family made a collective calm request, not an emotional plea but a practical demand, something in her posture shifted. There is power in a chorus that does not scream. A pressure that is polite but unyielding. We set clear consequences. If she continued to interfere in decisions about the kids or to demean Claire, she would be excluded from certain family activities and would not be permitted to make unilateral financial decisions on behalf of the grandchildren. It felt severe to enact restrictions against an elder relative, but the choice was not between punishment and leniency. It was between upholding the children's emotional safety and capitulating to a controlling pattern that would continue to harm. At first, Madeline tried guilt, then bargaining, then silence. But she could not maintain a public posture of righteousness while the truth had been carefully and corroboratively documented. When Aaron, not in dramatic confrontation but in a measured, adult conversation, told his mother that her behavior had to change, she finally paused. Whether she changed because she realized she would lose the family, or because she recognized her harm, is a question I never fully answer in my own mind. The point was that change began to occur. Change did not heal everything. Claire carried scars, and some wounds fold into your life like a permanent seam. But she learned to reclaim small things. To buy the groceries she wanted without apology. To enroll her daughter in music lessons without fear of critique. To say no to her mother-in-law and not apologize. She also learned a fiercer kind of self-compassion. To speak up when criticized. To leave gatherings when belittling resumed. To bring conversations back to us, her chosen family, when gaslighting occurred. Madeline attended a few family therapy sessions, which forced her to listen to the echoes of her voice in others. She apologized in a way that sounded practiced, but it was a start. Not every relationship was fully mended. Not every apology erased the past. But the house was quieter. Children were happier. Laughter returned without the thin edge of strain. I watched my daughter reclaim herself with a kind of awe. She took a part-time job teaching a class she loved, something she had once deferred because of the fear that ambitious women attracted judgment. She started a book club of her own, and perhaps most importantly, she began to speak about her past in a classroom of friends, not as a victim but as a woman who had survived and rebuilt. I want to be careful here. This is not a story of physical vengeance or public shaming. That kind of spectacle rarely ends well for anyone. The revenge we sought was quieter and, I hope, more lasting. We sought to dismantle the informal machinery that allowed Madeline to wield power. Her unchecked interference, the financial leverage she held, the social armor of respectability that allowed polite cruelty to go unnoticed. We reclaimed dignity through truth. We used the structures that protect people, documentation, witnesses, calm but firm boundaries, to reorder what had been normalized. We held Madeline accountable in ways that were practical and meaningful. No more unilateral decisions about the children, no more controlling finances. A mandate to attend counseling before resuming certain privileges. Those measures were not about humiliation. They were about safety. There's also another kind of revenge that I discovered. Refusing to let the narrative of my family be written by humiliation. Revenge became the act of making space for my daughter's life. Encouraging her ambitions, amplifying her voice at family dinners, reminding our grandchildren often that their mother was strong, wise, and creative. The smallest acts of reverence can be a slow, sweet undoing of years of diminishment. Years later, the thing I am proudest of is not a courtroom victory or a dramatic confession. It is the evening I sat on my porch and watched my grandchildren chase one another through the yard. Their laughter as raw and ordinary as summer. Claire called across the lawn and asked if I'd like a cup of tea. Her voice was steady and light. In that steady voice I heard the vicissitudes of recovery. The hard work, the therapy, the boundaries, the reconciliations, the little reinventions. She did not need to be rescued anymore. She had, in a way that was small and grand at once, rescued herself. Madeline still comes to family gatherings sometimes. She stands quieter now. There are moments of tenderness. A shared memory about a holiday. A soft apology offered without fanfare. There are also clear limits. We have learned to hold tenderness and boundaries in the same hand. It is a complicated hand to offer, but perhaps that's what family is. Messy, stubborn, sometimes healing. As for me, I discovered that courage can arrive late and be no less brilliant for it. I learned that silence is a choice, and that kindness should never cover the shrapnel of other people's cruelty. I learned that the best kind of revenge, if we must call it that, is to build a life so full of care and truth that the small cruelties lose their purchase. To the women reading this, especially those who have lived long enough to have memories both tender and bitter, it is never too late to name injustice. It is never too late to gather witnesses. Your voice matters. Evidence matters. A calm chorus of people who refuse to normalize indignity can change the architecture of a family. You can teach younger women how to secure boundaries. You can show them how the world looks different when you refuse to be small. Claire's story is not unique. It is the shape of many quiet lives. But it demonstrates a truth I hold close. Dignity is not given by those who belittle. It is remade by those who refuse to be silenced. If revenge is the reclamation of dignity, then let it be quiet, steady, and intentional. Let it be about protecting the future by telling the truth about the past.